schools, high school kids. So this is a remedy that is available to us. This is where we have to start prioritizing. All across the state, Des Moines, Waterloo, Davenport, we drop payroll for a year on dope for a week. You know, we will drop 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. I remember when Sekou did the American Dream Recovery Program, he talked about the period where they did, his brother, you know, Freddie Clark and Kalonji them had got into the drug. They were doing 20,000 a night and 50, 60,000 on the weekend. Now this is payroll for a year for a school like Joshua Christian Academy. In Waterloo, you're dropping a payroll for a year for a school on dope. In Cedar Rapids, in Davenport. Now, we can't figure out how to pay for things we ought to, like our kids to be in constructive programs, but we can figure out how to buy pork to feed our gout and our high blood pressure and our obesity, and we can figure out how to buy cigarettes to feed our cancer, and liquor to feed our cirrhosis and drunkenness. But we can't figure out that we have the resources within our community to become self-sufficient. And I think this is where that leadership training comes in. This is where the infrastructure for the Iowa Urban Initiative becomes unique, because we're not going out there saying, we got to figure out how we can get other folks to take care of us. It does not surprise people that 68, 66, 67, 68% of the kids in the Des Moines Public School District are on free and reduced lunch and live in poverty. That does not surprise people. But it does surprise people when 68% of the kids in Washington County, a rural county, are in poverty and are free or reduced lunch. And this is what we must understand. Iowa as a state is in trouble. The leadership of Iowa is old and tired. So on January 3rd, 1993, we woke up and we had Dave Nagel, who you know, Neil Smith, Fred Grandy, who many know, some remember as Gopher on the Love Boat, who was this congressman from Sioux City. And we had the Jims, that's Nussel, Leach, and Lightfoot in our U.S. Congressional delegation. On January 3rd, 2013, we'll have 4. That represents a 1.5 million population stagnation in the state. It represents a diminished power base of a third. We're now at 2/3 of the capacity we had because of the stagnation in this state. We now have 30% of our population, only counting them once, not counting them twice. If you have somebody who's a client of DHS in one program and another, we're not counting them twice. 30% of Iowa's population are now clients of the Department of Human Services. We've lost thousands of families. We've lost infrastructure. Once upon a time, Rath and Wilson employed people and paid them good salaries. Now we got service industry and minimum wage jobs and check cashing, you know. And so as we look at where Iowa is, this is the thing we have to understand as an urban community. If we look at where Iowa is, you know, 25, 30 years ago, casinos were not running through our community and snatching every loose piece of change we had, until Governor Branstad left the prayer breakfast he was attending and said, we're going to allow gambling to take everything you got. So you don't even have grandparents able to help their grandkids like they could 30 years ago. I remember coming to KBBG one time to do my show years ago, and I looked like I had just got out of prison, but I thought, well, I'll get here because I stay in the night, get to my room, shower, change, do the show. And this elderly lady was walking from the casino to Toledo. That's a long walk. But see, they were busing old white folks in to casinos and holding them hostage until they got everything they could get. So it's not just that you got old black folks in Davenport going to the riverboat, and Sioux City going to the riverboat, and you know, in Des Moines, folks going to Prairie Meadows. But this is a statewide crisis. And this is what's so unique. In many communities, the crisis of the black community is different than the crisis of the white community. In Iowa, people are hurting, including and especially white folks, including rural white folks. And this hurting's been going on for a long, long time.
Yes, it has.
That's why you had a thing called the farm crisis. And if I can just put it this blunt, here's what happened. We had 1 or 2 opportunities in Iowa 30 years ago. Either we could unite to fix our common problems, or we could get what we got, which was in rural communities that were hurting. They said, we're going to take your farm. We're going to take your truck. You're going to have to shoot your dog and you're going to lose your wife. But you get to be better than a nigger or a spit. And they said, we'll take the deal. And now, the pain that is felt in the black community is no different than the pain felt in the white community. But we lost 30 years of opportunity to unite to heal that pain. Which is why it's not just a State of Black Iowa initiative in 2012, but it is an Iowa urban initiative. Because we are going to address the pain and suffering of Iowans in urban communities, not just black folks, but including black folks.
Do you, to your knowledge, I know there's not such a thing in Waterloo, except on a small scale, have leadership training? Is that part of what needs to happen? Is that we have got to learn, and how do you do that? You, as you said, you may be an expert in your field, but there's a different thing when we're talking about the kind of leadership that is needed, and the fact that I know teachers who are teaching subjects that they don't know anything about. They just introduced some new math, and my little grandbaby said to me, Nana, could you come and help me with your math? I said, no, you'll have to teach me, because, I'm way down the road. And if people who are my age and have seen all of the desperation and hopelessness and the return of slaves to prisons, if we don't do what is being suggested, then, you might as well, too many of us have gone home, just gone home. We act only in a crisis, and for an hour or a couple of days or whatever, get the person in the ground, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. Crime here in Waterloo is unbelievable. Shootings, it is unheard of. And so I'm wondering in the educational field, we have resources that are, we could work wonders if we had, for instance, the retired teachers. What do they do? Where do they go? Has anybody ever cared to ask them to come back into the system? And we have a large number of teachers here, but I don't know, people just can't seem to get a hold of reality. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that we don't want to assume the necessary responsibility to raise our children, to get an education, find a job. That is missing in too many, hundreds of thousands, as a matter of fact. That is missing.
Well, I think it's imperative that we train our leaders, because we have went through some leadership training, and a lot of times you think you know that you really don't know, and we can't afford to make the mistakes we made in the past. We have to get this thing right, and we have an opportunity to get it right. To have leaders that know how to put out an agenda and stay with it. Sometimes we have an agenda to talk about the pork situation in Iowa, but we wound up actually talking about the beef or the corn, and we can't afford to do that anymore. Let's identify the problem and sit down and identify the solution, and let's go after that, and let's stay on track. It's real important, and cause a lot of times when we meet, we don't have an agenda. We let anyone interrupt and say whatever they're gonna say. Your opinion is all right, but when we're working on serious problems, solving serious problems in our community, then keep your comment to yourself until we finish dealing with the problem at hand. Okay. And then we can listen at your comments. It's good to know what you think, but when we, if there's a broken pipe in the building and it's destroying everything, we need to come up with a solution of how we're going to approach the problem, how we're going to fix the problem. But you want to talk about the crack in the window, you know, it's irrelevant to what's really going on. And I find this to be very true. Leadership and teachers, we must somehow or another establish a system, private schools, however you want to do it, and bring back some of those teachers. And I believe they're willing to come back and teach when it counts. But so many times they retire because they made those years, got my time in. I can get my money and not have to be worried about the system because anymore, let's be frank with it, anymore, when you got a single parent that's got an 8-year-old he's disturbing everything in the school, not just his class, the whole school is being disturbed by him, and mom will walk in and say, did you do that? Right in front of the teacher. Right. Teachers don't want that anymore. You know, that's right. The system will disturb everything. See, the more disturbance he called in the classroom, then the teacher not going to be able to reach him and teach him anything, and they expel him. He can go home and play games, watch TV. He might get kicked out for a couple of days. Mom might be working 2 jobs and not really able to deal with the situation. We say it takes a village to raise a child, but mom don't want the village involved with her children. She wants to try to do it. Single parenting is a serious problem in our communities. And young males, they're going to get off track and almost need another male to put them on track.
Oh, that's an interesting comment right there. We'll address that when we come back and more. Jonathan Narcissus and Reverend Young, who we're very glad to have with us today. And we will return momentarily and continue this conversation. Okay, we're back. And for those of you out in Radio Land who are tuning in, I certainly hope that you've been listening to this conversation and that it will be helpful and will call us to action and not act only in a crisis situation, but Jonathan Narcissus and Reverend Young here from Des Moines, this initiative that has been established already, does it have, for instance, how many ministers are involved?
Well, and here's something that many people won't understand, because the way we've traditionally formed organizations, we form an organization because we're reacting to a crisis. And then we invite everybody to show up, and folks raise their hand and say, I want to lead the education effort. And they can't spell, but they want to, so we say, well, sure. And then we have a committee of 74 people sitting around, they're all saying, you know, and nothing gets done. This is being structured as a meritocracy, where leadership is defined by merit and by competence and the ability to get results, as well as, and really, leadership should consist of three components.